Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. If not, please feel free just to write a question or write it into chat, and I will make sure that everything is fine with my microphone. So good morning. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for joining. I'm Martin, and I'm an analytics consultant with Biztory. And today I'm going to talk about how to prepare for the Tableau Certified Associate exam, or maybe to take it a bit more personally or show it a bit from a more personal perspective. I would like to talk a bit more about how did I personally prepare for this exam, meaning that I'm not only going through so I'm mostly going to go through theoretical part of this exam. I'm going to focus on what to expect from this exam, mostly on the topic level. But also I'm going to talk a little bit about the organization of the exam, what you are allowed to do, what you are not allowed to do, etc. During the session, please feel free to ask a question anytime. So depending on the topic, I will try to answer it either directly or maybe at the very end of the session. So let's get started. So as you probably know, there are three different exams, desktop exams that Tableau is currently offering. So it's the specialist one, or desktop specialist, the desktop certified associate, and desktop certified professional. So even though we are going to focus mostly on the certified associate, I thought that it might be useful to go a little bit through the differences between these exams. So when it comes to the specialist, I mean, in specialists, you're really required to have a basic skills and product knowledge of Tableau. There are not really prerequisites for the specialist exams from the technical point of view. However, while you're suggested to have a product experience of 3 months or more, and the official Tableau guidelines are that the desktop 1 fundamentals should be enough for you to pass the specialist exam. I'm not really sure whether you're familiar with this, but so there are official trainings that Tableau is offering. You need to pay for them. They are not very cheap, I would say. But so previously, I actually did purchase the trainings by Tableau, and I find them personally very well done. So I would actually recommend it, but it really is up to you. There are many different resources that I'm also going to talk about. So for the certified associate, which is the exam we are going to focus on mostly today, for this one, you're expected to have comprehensive skills and expertise of Tableau already. That means that you should be pretty comfortable with working with Tableau. And yeah, what kind of topics and what kind of things you should be able to do, that's something that we are going to go through. For the certified associate, there are still no prerequisites, so to say, but the suggested product experience would be 5 months and more. So in terms of the Tableau, the official trainings, it would be the desktop 1, the fundamentals, and the desktop 2, intermediate. Something to keep in mind with regard to this exam. So specialist does not really have any expiry date. For the certified associate, the certification is valid only for 2 years. Right. When it comes to the certified professional, so in this case, you are expected to be really a Tableau professional. So you should have advanced skill when it comes to Tableau expertise, and you should be also professional or really proficient in terms of visual practices. There is also a course offered by Tableau on visual practices. So for that one, it might be useful to go through that. For in order to be to do the certified professional exam, you have to have the certified associate one. So you cannot go directly to certified professional. But as I mentioned, you can do the certified associate without having the specialist. So suggested experience is about 12 months or more, but of course the suggested experience depend especially on how often you are using Tableau, on what level you are using Tableau. So it is a bit hard to say, okay, so if you work with Tableau for 12 months, you'll be able to manage the certified professional. For the certified professional one, you are expected to go through the desktop 1, 2, and desktop 3 course at the official Tableau trainings, and also the best visual practices. There's a course, I think it's called best visual practices or only visual practices, offered by Tableau. So that one is also very useful. And this exam, the certified professional, is valid for 3 years. Right, so moving forward, I would like to talk a little bit about the exam format of the certified associate. So for this one, you are going to have 2 hours time to solve those questions. However, it is actually always good to plan a little bit of extra time, around 30-40 minutes, maybe a little bit more. It really depends on how things are going to go, because before you actually start the exam, you're going to connect to the proctor, you're going to talk to him or her. There are going to be several check downs, technical checks, but also in terms of your room, whether you're alone in the room or not alone. So this might take some time. In terms of the question format, so there are going to be different questions. I mean, I mixed the different formats here a bit, but so you can expect multiple choice questions where only one answer is going to be correct. You can expect multiple response choices, multiple response format of questions where several answers are going to be correct. And then in terms of the format, there are sometimes only true or false questions, and then there are hands-on question and theoretical questions. So in the certified associate, in total there are 36 questions. It is approximately 18 theoretical and 18 practical questions, but it doesn't have to be exactly 18. So it might be also a bit more or less, but it is always going to be only 36 questions. So 36 questions, it gives you approximately 3.3 minutes per question. And so this is actually not that much, as you also realize right now. I mean, for the theoretical questions, many of them are really straightforward, so you might be able to answer them within a few seconds. But for the hands-on questions, sometimes you will need a bit more time to actually go through them and to answer them correctly. So the exam is automatically scored. And the point value actually varies per question. So the hands-on question are going to be worth a bit more than the theoretical questions. However, so you need to have at least 75% in order to pass. So at the end of the exam, after those 2 hours, you are going to know immediately whether you pass or not. However, sometimes later you will get a detailed report on how well did you pass and kind of a breakdown of the questions. So the exam is offered in different languages. So you can sign in via the Loyalist webpage, but that is everything is on the Tableau website. I think it shouldn't really be a problem. I forgot to write down the costs here. I think I forgot to check it out, but I think it was $250 per exam, I think. And the exam is delivered on a virtual Windows machine containing Tableau desktop. So this is something to keep in mind, especially for the Mac users. It will work on Mac too, but it is strongly recommended to use a Windows virtual machine and Windows computer if you can. So I think it is always better to organize a computer with Windows. What is also important to keep in mind, one of the information is that on the Windows virtual machine, not all of the shortcuts often works correctly. So you might want to try to avoid these. Right. So when it comes to the skills that are measured, so there are these official Tableau guidelines. And so in the exam, there are going to be 7 different topics, so to say, that the exam is focusing on. So the first one is data connections, organizing and simplifying data, field and chart types, calculations, mapping, analytics, and also some dashboarding. So in the next part, and it's going to be the biggest part of this skill up, is that I would like to go through these different topics and maybe just to show you what kind of topics you should be actually familiar with. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail, but I will through some of them. It was especially the things that when I was preparing for the exam, I realized, okay, I did a mock-up exam and then I realized, okay, so this is not something that I was expecting. So I just would like to bring these topics to your attention so you can focus on them during your preparation. All right. So in terms of the data connections, what you are supposed to be, what you should be able to do is to connect to the different data sources. That means it is also, I think, very useful to know what kind of data sources Tableau is actually currently able to connect to, because it might be one of the theoretical questions. But on the other hand, this is something that you can look up in Tableau very fast. And also to keep in mind, during the exam, you can always use Google. So you can always Google everything. You should be able to join tables from single or multiple databases. You should be familiar with blending, pivoting, and union of tables. So what does it mean? To go a little bit more into detail. So to connect to various data sources, why this is important? Well, mostly because if you will not be able to connect to the data sources, you will never be able to answer the questions right. So it's really substantial that you know how to work with data sources. It's hard to say. I mean, it is probably going to be CSV files or the normal Excel files, but be able and be prepared to connect also to different kind of files. I mean, it also might happen that there's going to be a JSON file or something else. So you can expect that for the exam, you will be provided with 4 to 5 different data sources. And these are the data sources you're going to work with. So I started here with data blending because I think it is one of the, I would say, less familiar topics. I mean, most of you and most of Can you hear me actually? Hmm. Are you able to hear me now? Um, so I'm trying to say, I'm trying to speak. Can you hear me now or can you not? Can you guys, can somebody react? Can you hear me? Can I just go on? Can you? Hello? I'm not really sure what let me, can you hear me? So I'm just asking in the chat, is anybody able to hear me or not? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Then I will just keep on. So where did we stop? And please let me know if there are any issues with the sound. All right, so this is where I stopped. So I would suggest that you are going to review the theory about the data connections, because when I was preparing for the exam, I often came across these kind of questions. Okay, so what is the difference in terms of, I don't know, performance for TDSX and TDS file? So this is something that is very nicely written on the website, on the Tableau website. So I would recommend to go through that. But again, something to keep in mind, you can use Google, so you can also Google it during the session. So I thought this is actually one of the example questions that you might come across during the session. So you're going to be asked a very easy question, which is which year saw the greatest increase in sales, for example, in sales. And you are going to be provided with a table, but the table is going to be structured in a way that a year is in a column. So there's not going to be the possibility for you really just to drag and drop or to pull year into rows into the view, but you will need to pivot the table. So this is certainly something I would suggest to go through, something to go through during the session. Right. So in terms of the organizing and simplifying the data, of course, you need to be able to understand how to filter the data. From my experience, I would suggest that you also, I'm not really sure to what extent you're familiar with the order of operation in Tableau when it comes to filters. but it is certainly something that I think you should review, because it will be useful and it will be helpful for you to answer certain questions. So, for example, you should be able to understand how to use the context filters sometimes, because it really might save you some time. So you should be able to sort. Another important thing is to be able to sort the data and understand the various ways to sort them. So really not just click on the icon, but also eventually, be able to understand how the different ways of sorting works. So especially the nested one, I would say, and sorting based on a field, because sometimes this might be very useful for you to know this during in this exam. Important thing, building groups and hierarchies. I mean, hierarchies are probably not going to be that relevant for the exam, but it is not difficult to understand how hierarchy works and how to do that. So it's a relatively easy topic. So it is something I think you should go through. Important thing is going to be to able to build sets, and not only to build them, but also in many questions you will need to build sets, and you will also need to be able to combine them so you can actually answer the questions. One thing to say also about the exam, it doesn't matter how you solve the question. The only thing that counts is the answer. And so you know that also in Tableau, there are always many different ways how to solve it. So any way is good, but you need to keep in mind that it's all about time. And even though 2 hours sounds like a lot of time, it not always is. Important thing, well, of course, you should be able to split the data in the database, so in the data pane, and work with the splits generally, and also with custom splits, I would say. You should be able to change for example, the date level, but also the date types. So what also I came across is that one of the favorite questions also in terms of the theory is being able to understand the differences between measures and dimensions. So it's good to understand the theoretical concepts of them. And well, of course, you should be able to change measures into dimensions and vice versa, because sometimes you will need it in order to answer this question. Very similar, you should be able to explain the difference between the discrete and continuous fields, and explain how to utilize all these Tableau generated fields. One thing, so when we start to talk about the field and chart types, I saw, well, during my preparation, one of the favorite question was, one of the common questions that you might not use that often during your work is to work with histograms. So you will be asked to create a histogram, and then they ask you to, okay, so, but we want to have a bin size of this value, and your task is to answer, for example, an average profit of the bin size between 5 and 5,500, something like that. So you will really need to combine. You will need to combine different kind of information, but in terms of histograms, really try to play around with it, try to modify it, and edit these different bin size. Right. So the next part are calculations. there are going to, well, 18% of the exam is going to be about calculations. So you should be familiar with them. I just thought I'm going to show you some example questions that might come up during the exam. So what might happen, or what you might be asked, is something like, well, you should determine which is the most common first letter of a customer name, or something similar, like you should find out customers starting with which letter do make the most profit in 2017. So for this, you should be familiar with concepts as a left and right. But honestly, I would review all the string and all the date calculations in Tableau, because this is probably going to, well, you are certainly going to use it and you will need it. Also for the similar situation for the dates. So I would recommend you to go to Tableau and really review all the date calculations. I mean, you don't have to be probably proficient in using all of them, but you should definitely be able to use kind of I'm not going to say the easy one, but the standard ones. So because you might be asked a question, something like, okay, so determine the average number of days between order and shipping date. And then you have to decide which category actually takes longest to ship on average. So for this, you are going to need to manipulate the different dates. And yeah, therefore, I would definitely go through all the dates calculation and review those. Right. Important thing, I mean, sounds like a basic thing, but looking at the aggregation options and logic statements, this will come up, and you will definitely need to change the aggregation, whether it's sum or it's count or count distinct. I mean, I think count distinct is going to be certainly one of the common ones that will come up. So again, be able that you understand how to change this, and this is really not a rocket science. It's something very easy, but just understand what these calculations are actually doing. As well, you should understand and be able to build logic statements. So if we look at something kind of easy one, it's something just like, if profit is smaller than 0, then the profit is going to be negative, else it will be 0 or positive. Because you are going to be asked a question, something like, you need to find the number of unique orders with negative profit. So for this, you will need to count distinct the order ID, and also you will have to be able to mark the profit as a positive or negative. So you will need to combine these calculations. Right. Another very important thing are table calculations and quick table calculations. So this will come up. This is an important thing. This is an important thing that will come up in the exam. So make sure that you know how to create them, but also make sure that you understand how do the different ways of computing actually work. So for my preparation, I remember I created like a very simple Excel with few numbers, something very comprehensible. And then I was playing with the different table calculations, really just to understand what they are actually doing. So this is something very important. And of course, as you know, there are different ways or different things that you can calculate in table calculations. So again, you should understand all of them. So looking at the running total, difference, percent difference, percent of total, and all the others, because you are certainly going to be asked something like, so what was the percentage of profit, or what percentage of profit was made in July 2020? So assuming we only have data for 2020, then you could really do a table calculation for this year, calculate the percent of total, and then look in July, and then you have your answer. So these are, I would say, the very basic things, but you will definitely need them. Right. LODs. So LODs are going to be a part of the exam. It is not going to be a huge part of the exam, but I think it is really, really useful. I mean, it is important to know the easy one or the common one, but sometimes it's also very useful to maybe being able to understand a bit more complex or intermediate working with the LODs. So in terms of theory, you should be able to understand what they do and what are the different types of LOD expressions. I think that for certified associate, the fixed LOD should be enough for CA, because, well, honestly, with fixed you can do most of stuff, also compared to include exclude. But as I said, I think this one is going to be enough. So it might be a theoretical question. So I don't know, they might ask you, so what will the calculation sum of profit in these curly brackets return? And so you should understand that it is going to be the complete profit for everything that is in there, that is in the data. So, or you can do that fixing that on different levels, but really make sure that you understand what they do. Or there might be also a little bit more tricky one, a more tricky question, when they will ask you something like, for customers making their first purchase in 2012, how many placed 3 or more separate orders? So first, to understand who are the customers in 2012, who did the first purchase in 2012, you might need something as a fixed customer ID, a minimum of order year, and then you will find out which are the ones that did place their first order in 2012, and then based on that, you would need to then calculate the distinct order IDs. So you have the answer for this. So I would suggest that you spend a bit of time thinking about this and playing a bit around with these things, because LODs are going to be a part of the exam, and especially so when I remember, so when I was preparing for it, I realized often there are ways to answer questions differently. For example, in this case, you could also first look for the minimum of order days for all customers. Then you would create a set from these customers or a group from these customers and going this way. But so it is a way to solve the issue. And I remember when I was doing the mock-up exam, I did solve the issue, but it took me a lot of time, and I lost way too much time. So I would suggest that you understand these concepts. Right. Really, I mean, for the other things, you will need to build some arithmetic calculations. That's pretty sure. So these are the kind of easy examples. Well, I don't think they're going to be like super complex examples for or questions about the arithmetic calculations, but there will be certainly something like, well, sum of profit divided by sum of sales, or the sum of, or the average of sales, or something like that. Or you might need to build something like, okay, give me the profit divided by sales only if the segment is consumer, and otherwise it's going to be 0. So really make sure that you understand this kind of questions. Right, building grand totals and subtotals. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more here, I think. Yeah, so looking at the analytics, well, analytics is 15 part of the exam. And what I would suggest you to do is to go to Tableau, look at the analytics pane, and go through those different things, and honestly just make sure that you understand what these are doing. So what you should be able to understand are all these trend lines, forecasting, box plots, reference distribution, statistical summary cards, or instant analytics and that data highlighter. But so the way you might be forced to use this in the exam is that, for example, when we look at the reference lines or reference bands, what might happen is that they're going to ask you which segment has the sum of sales below the lower quartile. And for this, you need to know how to find out what the lower quartile is, or they're going to ask you about median or upper quartile, and all these different things that you can actually analyze in the analytics pane. So I think that this is something that you will need to go through. Or they also might ask you something like, what is the p-value of xy? So I mean, on this previous slide, you know, this is a very simple thing here, but you need to understand how to build these kind of graphs and how to get the p-value. So meaning you should understand how to use the trend line. Right. So moving forward, these are only just some suggestions that I kind of, I personally was not working with mapping that much previously. And in the exam, it's 13%. I mean, normally the questions are not very difficult from my perspective. So the most kind of question I came across is something like, okay, so look at the card, which state is surrounded only by unprofitable states, or something like that. So this is something to prepare for, but I would also review these different mapping concepts. So we understand, you know, how to map pan and zoom, how you filter a card. Also, well, map layering, it is suggested to be able to use it by Tableau. You might be asked about that. Something that I came across is this lasso and radial selection. So because what you might be asked about, and so when I was, as I said, from my experience, I personally was not working that much with cards. And then in the mock-up exam, I was asked a question, something like, how many customers live in 70-kilometer radius of Houston? And I was not really sure how to do that. I mean, it's very easy for somebody who's working with maps, but that's why you should be able to use the lasso and radial selections, because this will give you the possibility. This will give you the possibility to answer questions like this. So this is certainly something that I would focus on. I think that this will come up because this comes up quite often, that you're going to get a data source. But you, for example, might not see, so you're going to drag certain values to a map, but you're not going to see any values at all. So in that case, you will see something like here, all the unknown values. So just make sure that you know how to edit these locations and assign the correct values, and then you can actually work with the data. Right. Last thing, I mean, in terms of dashboards, you are not going to be asked to create any new fancy dashboards. I think it will mostly be about you're going to get some dashboards that's been done, and you might need to answer questions with them. So you will be asked a question, so that will prove whether you're able to work with dashboards. But something I think that would be useful to go through are the dashboard actions, because this is one of those things that it might be asked during the exam. Probably will not be anything super difficult, but as I said, this is anyway a very important thing to know. Right. Um, so I do have a few more additional information, and this is something that is good to keep in mind when you're preparing for the exam. So in the exam, there is no external screen allowed. So I think most of us are used to work with external screens, but this is not allowed. So make sure that you prepare without it. You should use a Chrome for the exam. There's no pen and paper allowed, so you cannot make notes. During the exam, you need to make sure that your camera and microphone are fully enabled. So this will be an important thing to know. You will need to be alone in the room, because the proctor is also going to check with the camera whether there is somebody or not. Important thing, you are not allowed to talk during the exam. What I would suggest, if you're not sure about the answer of the question, you have the option to mark a question or mark an answer, and then you can come back at the end, for example. So it might be good to ask all these to answer all the easy questions at the very beginning, and then go to the hard one at the end when you have actually time to answer them. And one more thing, so this might not be, it doesn't sound like an important thing, but during the exam, make sure that you name your data sources, sheets, and dashboards, but especially data sources and sheets wisely, because there are going to be a bunch of them, and you might get lost in it. So at the very end of the exam, you will have a bunch of worksheets and data sources, and you can lose the overview, I would say. So this is something I would suggest you to do. And again, you can use Google. So you really can Google different questions, so and different answers. So make use out of it, but also think about the time. Right. Sorry. When it comes to resources, I mean, this is something that I already mentioned previously. So I would suggest you that you review the desktop fundamentals and the intermediate one, the official trainings from Tableau. On the official website, there is the exam guide for Desktop Certified Associate. You should definitely go through that. And there is also one question that, not one question, there is a mock-up exam that you can go through. So I think it's very useful for you to go through that and say, okay, how comfortable am I with these questions? But so when I was preparing for it, I kind of realized, okay, it's not really enough probably to have only one mock-up exam. So there is a really good resource that I used, which are these 3 mock-up exams. I can share the link with you afterwards. These are unfortunately paid. I think it's like $10 or 10 euros or something. But I think that these are really useful because you can also do the mock-up exam with timing. So you really can get the kind of a natural feeling of the exam. So that's something that I would recommend. I skipped for now, well, the Tableau Specialist Exam Notes by Justin Dixon. I think these are really helpful for the theory. So he provides really a really good theory review. So I think this is something to go through before the exam. and maybe also save them something if a questions come up during the exam, so you can really just have a look there. Right. Then there is also a Udemy course, I think. I tried to do that one. What I found useful are there are also mock-up exams that you can take, and this was good. For the actual theory or the explanation, I mean, it's going to be very repetitive, because if you've done the official trainings by Tableau, then it's mostly going to be repetition. But you also, I think, might just do the Udemy courses, and it also might be useful for you to, yeah, it should be enough theoretically to pass the exam. And what I wrote down is also the Tableau file types and folders. There is if you Google it, there are different. Well, it's a website by Tableau where you can actually go through all these different file types and maybe just save it to your browser if a questions about this comes up. Yeah. So this was really, I think these were the resources that I'm using for the preparation.